please bring your passports with you. And during the last one, I think it was during Hanukkah, they said...
Hanukkah, they actually took them.
Yeah, they said you have to send a picture of your passport as well beforehand. Presumably just so that they can have everybody on file for security reasons. So, not ideal for somebody who's officially supposed to have gone to the Yisrael Gius to take care of this stuff.
You?
Yeah. I really should, honestly.
I won't turn around the camera. I don't want anybody to see now that, there's millions of people watching on YouTube.
I didn't know you were rolling.
The millions and millions of people watching on YouTube. So, be careful. Okay, so we learned in Ois Gimel. We started Ois Gimel, we didn't finish it. The Moshe Rabbeinu is Zan Umfarnes Es Yisrael Be'inyan Amuna. And that's the Inyan of Raya Mehemna. And he brings Amuna into Pnimius because Amuna can be a makif. Amuna can be a state that it's there, and we talked about that at length yesterday. Amuna is a koyach of the nefesh. It's not something I have to acquire, it's something I have. But I obviously want to bring that into my conscious reality. I want to live that. We'll see how, what that means. Umamshich b'maimer. So the Rebbe, I'm just reviewing yesterday, the Mamshich b'maimer, the Rebbe mentions that the Inyan of Raya Mehemna relates to every generation, right? Just like we see in Nigla, we see it in Pnimius, in the Zoyar, the Ispashtusa, the Moshe Shebechol Dar, right? That's a Zoyar. And we also see it in Nigla. We see it in a Medrash. And what's the Medrash say? Mordechai b'dare k'Moshe b'dare. Mordechai in his generation was like Moshe in his generation. And what did Mordechai do? So Mordechai brought the people to a state of Mesiras Nefesh, and we'll see that state of Mesiras Nefesh was a function of internalizing their emunah. So that's why, don't forget that word, it's a good word, panemius, but that line we're not counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up from the bottom. We got to the word hamitzvos, period. And we're still talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer. And after he explains at length, Shemeshe's Pashtusa delay, that Moshe and the Hispashtus of Moshe, Shebachol Dara, that's in every generation, Mechazgi Mesamun the Israel, strengthen the imun of the Jewish people. Mevari then explains, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Diuk Loshen Akosav Shemen Zayis Zach, Kosis Lamar. And that was one of our questions. Right? Why does it say kosis lama'ar, not kosis laha'ir? Right? That we should crush the oil to give light. We don't say that. We say we should crush the oil as a source of light. That's why we say that. Oh, so that's what the Rebbe is about to explain now. So why does it say kosis lama'ar v'loy laha'ir? Shebetzmana golus shekol echad v'echad unishber v'nidke. In the time of Golus, when the Jews are broken and down, by virtue of this, ha'etzem, the ants, shemimenu nimsa, or that the light comes out of the sun. The sun, even though the sunlight, it's sun. What comes out of the sun? Sunlight. Okay, so etzem and neshama, the essence of the soul, is the essence of the soul. It's not the state of light. Also, the essence of Kadosh Baruch Hu is not a state of light. It's a state of essential being. That state of essential being is the source of what you and I call godly light. So too in the neshama, the source of the of the neshama, the expression of the neshama, the different levels of the neshama. Those 4 levels called chaya, which is the source of ratzon, which is a makif. We have already talked about this. It's interesting, the Rebbe does not use the words Chai and Yechida at all, even, I don't think he used it even once in this whole Maimer. Even though he's talking about those 2 levels of Neshama, he doesn't use the words. He talks about Makif and Etzim. So the level of Makif is Chaya Shebenefesh, but it's light. It's not the essence of the soul, it's an expression of the soul. What's Chaya Shebenefesh? The source of a new Ratzah. Your will. It's the part of your it's a makif, but it's a makif that is constantly being revealed in panemius. You're constantly becoming consciously aware of your will. Now there's aspects, we talked about this yesterday also, there's aspects of your will that you're not conscious of. Say that, okay. But there's most of the aspects of your will you are conscious of. Oh, I want a drink. Okay, where did that come from? It wasn't an intellectual decision, right? I had some subconscious desire for a drink, and that subconscious desire elevated itself into your conscious reality, and you started to think about it. You went, oh, that would be nice. I'd like that. And you get up out of Chassidus class and go get a drink. Not you guys, but you know. Right? Okay. Or you walk over to the fountain and get a drink, wherever you happen to be. Where'd it come from? A place called Rutzin. That's a makif, but it's a makif that's called makif karev. It's close because it expresses itself in panemius, in those things we need in gashmias. So there's also 3 different levels of reality: panemius, makif hakarev, and makif harochoik, makif that's far away. What's the stuff that we need in panemius? We call it food and air. We bring that into ourselves literally, right? And we can't live without it. Okay, there's a makif hakarev, clothes.
Shelter.
No, it's a makif harochoik.
Oh, that's like
because you and I could live in the same house, even though you're 5'2" and I'm 8'6". We can live in the same house, right? Because it's not lefi me. Right? Maki for karev, my clothes have to fit. And if you see a shirt hanging in the closet, then you know it's a kid's shirt, an adult shirt. If you walk into a room in the house with no furniture, is this a kid's room or a parent's room? It's just a room. It's all the same.
Makif is something that only applies to you?
Makif for karev is a level of makif, so it's not panemius, but it has to fit, so to speak, meaning it's close to revealed reality. It's not obviously clothes are just as revealed as food, right? But it's close to what we'll call revealed conscious reality, but it's not. That's why your ratzon will have a lot to do with your conscious reality, and vice versa. Your conscious reality will have a lot to do with your ratzon, right? And that's just by definition. Why? Well, it's a makif, but it's karev. Right, so I'm going to think about the things I want, and I'm going to want the things I think about. Okay. Whereas a muna, which is a makif harochoik, necessarily I'm thinking about the things I want, and I want the things I think about. That's just existential, because that's the nature of ratzon. It's not necessarily the nature of emunah. Emunah might not resonate in consciousness. It's a makif, but it's rachok. Might not come close. Right? So generally we understand, and the Rebbe is going to explain this, that Mesiras Nefesh, which is what Mordechai brought the Jewish people to, the Mesiras Nefesh comes from Etzem Nefesh, what we call Yechida. Again, the Rebbe, for whatever reason, it's very interesting. In this whole Maimon, the Rebbe does not use the words Chayim Yechida. Don't know why. Right? Now, in Tanya, you'll never find those words. They're hinted at, but the highest level that Tanya talks about generally is Chochmah Shebenefesh, which is still Naran, which is Nefer Chuch Neshama. Chochmah is Neshama. There's 3 levels of the soul clothed in the body. He does not generally talk about Chayim Yechida. He'll talk about the will, he talks about Ratzon, but he doesn't spend a great deal of time talking about those levels of Neshama. So the Mesiras Nefesh in Perek Chafei has a lot to do with Chochmah Shebenefesh. So the state of Gullus brings about a revelation of Ma'or, of the etzem of the neshama. And the Jew, albeit when things are calm, he might not be so focused on this, but when things get crazy, that arouses in him an extremely powerful connection to his essential Jewishness, and he acts in accordance with that. Right? So that's Mesiras Nefesh. That's Kosis L'Ma'or. That's the pasuk. Right? So let's go by Dia Koloshina Kosov, Shem and Zai Zach Kosis Lamar, Lamar Veloy Lahire, 3 lines up. Shebezmana Golas, Shekol Echad Vechad Unishbar Venitger Kosis, everybody's crushed. Al Yedeza Megim Lamar, come to Amar, Etzim. Shemimena Sar, that from it the ore is found. The Tzarech Lahavin, now we have to understand. Hashaychus da Perish Bekosis Lamar, right? The connection of this understanding of Kosis Lamar, that what is it that brings about a revelation of Etzem and Neshama, the crushedness of Gullus. Lamavur b'maimer, that which is explained in the Maimer. This is our Rebbe asking this question. Lefanav, lifnezem, sorry. Before this in the Maimer, what did it say? That Moshe and the expression of Moshe in every generation, Zan and Farneses Amuna Shtiva Panemius, that Moshe brings about the state that the Amuna should be Panemius. So what is it? Is it Gullus or is it Moshe? Right? What is it that's bringing about this very powerful conscious connection to our essential being? Right? Is it Moshe doing it? Because that's the tetzave, B'nai Yisrael. You connect the Jewish people. What does that mean? So the Frierdiker Rebbe said that means that Moshe Rabbeinu is Megala the Amunah in the Jewish people. He's Zon and Farneses Amunah. He's the Raya Mehemna. He nourishes our Amunah. What does that mean, nourishing our Amunah? He brings it into Panemius. And we're going to see how that can be. How can we bring it into Panemius Dafka through a revelation of Etzem and Neshama? Okay, so if that's the case, that's all well and good. But the rest of the pasuk says Kosis Lamar. That's Dafka a result of Golus that we reach the state of a revelation of Etzem and Neshama, and that's expressed generally, even the Rebbe hasn't said it here, but we'll say it in the next verse in Dalit, Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice. Azoiv v'nit andrish. This is the way it is, and it can't be any other way. That's Etzem and Neshama. There is no other reality. There is no possibility of being separate from the Eibishter. It doesn't exist. Where is that truth? It's in the Neshama.
They have to be mutually exclusive necessarily?
Well, they clearly aren't because they're in the same pasuk. We have to understand, but how does that work? Bottom line, what's the source of that revelation of Etzem? Right? Meisha in Golus specifically? Well, okay, but then what is it? Is it the Golus or is it Meisha? Right? You're right, it's ultimately going to be both. Right? A frum Jew in the Soviet Union in 1935 was called a Schneerson-ist. Right? They weren't necessarily Lubavitchers, but the Hasidim of the Rebbe were so completely identified with Frumkeit in the minds of the Soviets that every Frum Jew was called a Schneerson-ist, which is the ultimate compliment. But what does that mean? So it's exactly what you just said, but we have to understand the dynamic of it. What is it that allowed for the Golis, the Kosis, to bring about a revelation of Ma'or, their connection to the Frierdiker Rebbe? Okay, fine, I get it. Why? What's that? Why? I mean, theoretically, the Rebbe should be able to do that without Golis, and theoretically, Golis should be able to do that without the Rebbe, right? So why are those two things somehow dancing together, right? But interesting enough, the Jews, the Hasidim of the Rebbe, I mean, we mentioned in Shir the other day, right? Rav Nanas, 90% of the people he went to Yeshiva with were Meiser Nefesh B'Feil Mamish. And they gave up their life in Stalin's camps. They died. The Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe Shab told them. The Rabbi Rav Nanas went in. He wasn't Rav Nanas in those days. He was a bacher in Yeshiva. In about he got there in 1913. He was a bacher till 1915. Then he went home to see his parents because you were allowed to go home to see your parents after 2 years. You weren't allowed out of the yeshiva for a day. The first 2 years you were in San not one day. Right? So then after 2 years you were allowed to go see your parents. So he was told by the Rebbe Shab to go see his parents. On the way, it's interesting, he went by the Rebbe's father's house, and that's where he met the Rebbe. The Rebbe, so Rav Nanas was 17, the Rebbe was 12. He was younger than Rav Nanas. So, but he came back to Lubavitch because I don't know whether this. I guess this story was near the end of his time in Zabacher. Well, I mean, his time his first stint in Lubavitch. So they went. He was very close with the Rebbe Shab's wife, and he asked her if they could see the Rebbe, and she said, wait in the house, and when he comes home, you can talk to him. So they waited in the house, and the Rebbe came home. They asked the Rebbe the question, why is it so hard? This is killing us. Don't forget to me, it's killing us. So it was, if you ever looked at the schedule, it's pretty difficult. 7:30 to 9:30 Chassidus, 12 to 8 Nigla, and in the summer that was straight because you didn't have to have yet, right? So they just learned for 8 hours straight. They would eat before 12, 9:30 and 12. They would daven chakras and eat. Then 8 hours of Nigla. Then 9 to 11 was Chassidus. And that was 5 days a week. Friday was 7:30 to 9:30 Chassidus. And then Nigla until an hour or two before Shabbos. And I remember Rav Nanas was telling me this, and he said he didn't mean to make a point with this. He just said, matter of fact, the Bachrim who had Shabbos pants would put them on and wash their everyday pants after Seder Friday and hang them up to dry. The Bachrim who had Shabbos pants. There were Bachrim who didn't have Shabbos pants. They had one pair of pants and they just wore that. That's what they had. These people were poor. It's just crazy. So, and that just, and about the Rebbe would say a mimer Friday night. Rebbe Shab used to say my mimer Friday night, and the Bachrim had to know the mimer Baal Peh Sunday morning in Chassidus Shir. Which means they'd hear Friday night, they'd sit, Rav Nanas said they'd sit most of the night Friday night chazering the mimer. Wouldn't go to sleep so much Friday night. You'd have to chazer the mimer. And then you might get a little sleep, but then you'd get up for Chassidus Seder, and Chassidus Seder, you would chazer the mimer, and often the Rebbe Shab would walk around Zal and help them chazer the mimer during Chassidus Seder Shabbos in the morning. And then Meitzi Shabbos, the first thing you do is start writing it down, writing down what you remember. And he said the Bachrim who had been around a while were pretty good at and could get some sleep Meitzi Shabbos. The new Bachrim didn't sleep Meitzi Shabbos because they were up memorizing this whole thing the whole night. And then the next week, 7:30. And that just went for 2 years. There was no time off. So it was hard. So they asked the Rebbe, why is it so hard? They're just killing us. The Rebbe said, strange winds are blowing, and you're going to have to be Meiser Nefesh. And this is the word Rav Nanas used. I don't imagine that this is the word that Rebbe Shab used. The word Rav Nanas used was boot camp. This is your boot camp. I can't imagine the Rebbe Shab said boot camp. Where would he get that from? I don't know where Rav Nanas got that from, but that's what he said. Zeh boot camp shalcha. He said it to me in Hebrew. He still loves speaking Hebrew. Came to Eretz Yisrael when he was basically 70. Yeah, 70. And somehow figured out how to speak Hebrew. He used to really work at it. He liked it. He would speak Hebrew all the time. Yeah, obviously spoke Russian and Yiddish, but he liked speaking Hebrew. So that was true. That was your boot camp. Because the Rav Nanas said none of them fried out. They all, the Eibishter was so real to them that the Russians didn't move them. Pretty astounding. Okay, so we have to understand that. That's our tzarich lahavin. So now the Rebbe is going back to the Friedrich Rebbe's mimer. Vine abir b'posek Veata tetzave. The explanation of the posek Veata tetzave, because there's two things happening in the Friedrich Rebbe's mimer, and there's also for that reason there's two things happening in our mimer here. In the Friedrich Rebbe's mimer there's two things happening. Mitzad echad, the Rebbe is talking about Purim because it's a Purim cotton mimer. Mitzad sheni, it's Parshas Tetzave, so the Rebbe is discussing Veata tetzave and weaving those two together. Now it makes perfect sense because the first pasuk Veata tetzave is Bnei Yisrael, v'yichol elech Hashem zayzach. Kasis Lamar, so that's all about Moshe Rabbeinu connecting us to the Eibishter and we expressing our Mesiras Nefesh. Okay, so that's Purim. But in the context of that Maimer, so the Rebbe explains the pasuk v'hine habir b'pasuk Veata tetzave. And now this is the order that the Rebbe is pointing out. In the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, he explains the inyan of Veata tetzave b'Maimer behemshech as a continuation l'hamavur b'tchilas Maimer, to that which is explained at the beginning of the Maimer. The first thing the Rebbe explains in the Maimer is Purim, which we're going to see right now. And after that, the Rebbe explains the inyan of Veata tetzave. Okay, so the Rebbe is going to find that interesting and want to explain that. So just remember that. The Peirush v'kibul Yehudim asher chalu lasais. That famous verse, that famous pasuk at the end of the whole story of Esther, it's in Perek Tes, where it says that after we've won the battles and we partied, so it says, "V'kibul Yehudim asher chalu lasais." The Jews received that they had begun to do. So that Bechlal is a strange pasuk. What does that mean? We received that which we had begun to do. If we already begun to do it, so then hadn't we received it? How can you do it if you haven't received it yet? Okay, but everybody tries to figure that out. So we'll see. The Rebbe is going to have an explanation of that, and there's also going to be a Maimer Hazal on another pasuk that's very similar to that, right? And they're very similar explanations, though there are diukim that explain the difference between them. What does that mean? Shekiblu mashe hechalu bezman matan Torah. Right, that they accepted that which they had begun to do at the time of Matan Torah. What does that mean? The Matan Torah isas chol. Matan Torah was the beginning. Hechalu lasas. They began to do. B'mei Achashverosh, in the time of Achashverosh, B'zman Gezeres Haman, in the time of the decree of Haman, Haisa Kabbalah. That was the true acceptance of the Torah of the Jewish people for Kibul Yehudim. That's what it means, Kibul Yehudim. Now, we could talk about that, but we don't have to because the Rebbe is going to talk about that, right? So he's going to ask the questions that there are the obvious questions, and he's going to give answers to those questions. So we'll just keep reading and learning. There's no reason to forbring about it ourselves because the Rebbe is going to forbring about it, right? So somehow Kabbalah Torah at the time of Purim was greater than the Kabbalah Torah at the time of Matan Torah. Val derech Maimer Razal, and similar to the Maimer Chazal, al pasuk kimu v'kiblu Yehudim, another pasuk, right? It's what, 8 psukim later, I think. Is that right? No, less. 4 psukim later. 4 psukim later, what does it say? Kimu v'kiblu Yehudim. They established and received the Jews. Now, obviously, what should it say? They received and they established. That mean to be Mekayim a mitzvah. What does that mean? That means you performed the mitzvah. Okay, so you perform the mitzvah when? After you get the mitzvah. You can't perform the mitzvah before you get the mitzvah. How can I do that? So why is it kimu v'kiblu? It should be kiblu v'kimu. They received it and they fulfilled it. Why does it say kimu v'kiblu? They fulfilled and received. It's a strange order. So what do Chazal say? The Medrash, kimu masha kiblu kfar. They fulfilled that which they had already received, which is very similar to the Rebbe's pshat in Kiblu Yemeshech Halulasais. That now there is a difference because in the first pasuk of the Frierdiker Rebbe, it doesn't say they accepted anything at Matan Torah; they just did, and the acceptance was at Purim. In the second pasuk, the acceptance was at Matan Torah, and the kiyum was at Purim. The second pasuk says kimu v'kiblu. They lived up to that which they had already accepted. They fulfilled that which they had already accepted. That's the pasuk that the way Chazal explained. The pasuk the Frierdiker Rebbe quoted, it's interesting to note, it's just an interesting diuk in the whole thing, that it doesn't say they accepted the Torah at Matan Torah. It says, Adarabba, v'kiblu Yehudim asher chalu lasas. The true Kabbalah was at Purim. Whereas in the second pasuk, the Kiyum was at Purim, but the Kabbalah was at Matan Torah. Putting all that together is not so simple. Okay. And what does that mean? What does that mean? Kimu mashkibu v'kar dezeh shigdimu nasa l'nishma b'matan Torah. We said nasa v'nishma. We said we're going to do it, which seems to be a pretty powerful acceptance of the Torah. Right? That which they were makdim nasa l'nishma, and they got crowns for that, 2 crowns, one for nasa and one for nishma. Of course, the question is asked, why do you get a crown for nishma? I get that I get a crown for nasa, because nasa is going beyond tam v'das, beyond intellect, Kabbalah soul, and saying that I'm doing this even though I don't understand it. I'm doing it because I have a deeper connection to it. Okay, so that's the crown, so to speak, the level beyond my intellect. But then nishma, what's nishma? Nishma is my intellect. So why do I get a crown for intellect? Right? The crown represents a level of ma'ilami in intellect, not intellect. So I shouldn't get a crown for intellect, but yet we got a crown for nasa and a crown for nishma. There were 3 crowns, right? The angels put 2 on our heads and 1 on the Eibishter's head, right, so to speak. Right? Okay. So why do we get this? Is not in our mind, which is absolutely an important point to understand in the whole union of nasa and nishma. So why do we get a crown for nishma? So that's a very important point in understanding what human intellect is about relative to Chassidus. How does Chassidus, Torah in general, Chassidus befrat, relate to human intellect? Human intellect isn't about coming to an experience of truth through intellect. Right? Coming to the truth through intellect. Right? Human intellect is what you use to bring something that's beyond intellect into intellect. What's ultimately emunah into das, which is why the Rambam talks about the mitzvah lahamin and the mitzvah ladas. Right? Once when he talks about havaya echad, he talks about, emunah. So what's emunah? Emunah is the emunah. There's a mitzvah lahamin, that there's a mamsi rishon, etc. Whereas the Rambam says mitzvah ladas. Once in the Sefer Yad HaChazaka and in Hilchos Yisod Torah, and once in Sefer Mitzvahs. Lahamin and ladas, both. Oh, okay. So the whole idea of intellect is not that intellect should be the arbiter of truth. Intellect is the vehicle to bring into conscious reality a level beyond intellect. So you get a crown for intellect if you use intellect that way. That's Nasa v'nishma. Nasa v'nishma is, this is what truth is. Now I'm going to use my intellect to bring that truth into my conscious reality. I'm not going to decide whether or not it's truth based on my intellect. So then I get a crown for that intellect, so to speak. Okay, so that's why we got 2 crowns. That which we preceded nasa l'nishma, b'matan Torah, that was only the acceptance. Then they mamish fulfilled that which they were mekabel. Okay, now that's the Frierdiker Rebbe's statement and the Maimer Chazal, which are fairly similar, and for our purposes, we'll say they're basically the same, even though obviously there's diukim and you can show the difference. Umedayik b'Maimer, just simply because the Frierdiker Rebbe was talking about a different pasuk, right? He was talking about Kibul Yehudim. The Chazal talking about Kima v'Kibul. Umedayik b'Maimer shelo hu davar pela. This seems to be a davar pela. If you look in footnote 24, it's very interesting. Habir b'diuk lashon zeh, the explanation and the careful reading of this word, pella, ve'edi b'mas v'kibul Yehudim depurim katan tavshin lamed ches sif aleph. So the Rebbe in lamed ches, so he discusses parenthetically, he discusses the union of pella. What does it mean, davar pella? Right? Just say it's lo muvan. Why is it a pella? A pella means something wondrous. The Rebbe explains over there something very, very interesting. That a pella, lo muvan means I don't understand it. Pella means, it's not that I don't understand it. It seems to be the opposite of what you would understand. It's not just something I don't get. It's completely counterintuitive. Right? That's the pella, and that's certainly what this is. right? Why? Because what are we saying? Well, we're going to see it inside, but we're saying that at the time of Purim, when we were on the lowest level imaginable, we received the Torah in a deeper way than we did in the time of Matan Torah, when we were on the highest level imaginable. Well, that's a Pella. That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's counterintuitive, completely and totally. Because Purim, we're on the lowest level possible. We're at the party. Right? I mean, simple pshat. Why was this gezerah made against the Jewish people? So we went to the party. We were at the Achashverosh's party. There was kosher food there. Kirtzon ish v'ish. Right? There was kosher food. We're still at the party. Right? The Matan Torah Yisrael b'tachli sayilui. Matan Torah, the Jews were in the highest level. And then there was for them a revelation of Elokus b'dargachi nailis in the highest level imaginable. The Neisif was in addition to this, to the fact shegam koydem Matan Torah giluyim nailim b'yes. Even before Matan Torah, there were very, very powerful revelations. Right? The Makkos. Hagilu Shai B'Yitzias Mitzrayim, all of the revelations that were Yitzias Mitzrayim, the 10 Makkos, and Befrat, and particularly the greatest Gilu of all relative to Yitzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, splitting the Red Sea. That's pretty serious stuff. Shivcha Shebiyam, the simple maidservant on the sea, had a greater revelation of Elokus than Yechezkel ben Buzi, than the prophet Yechezkel, has a 50-chapter book that he wrote of his prophecies. Okay, so the simple maidservant on the Yam, her Gilu Elokus at that moment was more powerful than Yechezkel and Navi. Unbelievable. And yet still, Gilu Yishar B'Shas Matan Torah, the Gilu, the revelation that was at the time of Matan Torah, Haya Gilu Naili Oidiyos, was even greater. Ubimei Achashverosh, and yet in the time of Achashverosh, Haya Yisrael B'Tachlis Yerida, they were in the lowest level imaginable. The Neisef, in addition, Lahelim Vehester, in addition to the concealment and hiddenness, Shebachol Golus, that's in every Golus, because that's the nature of Golus, a time of concealment. The Kol Golus Ubedugmas Golus Mitzrayim, that every Golus is similar to Golus Mitzrayim, that's the prototype of all Golus. And what do we see from Golus Mitzrayim? Ukamei Golus Mitzrayim Ksiv, it says, V'loi Shamuel Moshe Miketzeruchem Yaveda Kasha. Right? It says that Moshe Rabbeinu came and told them that the Geula is happening, and they couldn't listen. They didn't listen to Moshe because of their shortness of breath and their heavy work. Now, shortness of breath is also Ketzer Ruach, meaning Ruach. Everybody finds it interesting. Meaning when Mashpiyim teach this Maimer, they do find it interesting that the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe here brings that example that's the example to show the lowliness and concealment of Gullus. That what? They don't listen to Moshe. There's all sorts of things you could say about Yitzias Mitzrayim right there in those psukim. Right? Is there a Chumash here? There must be a Chumash. We don't have a Chumash? It's a lot of Tanya's.
Yeah.
Baruch Hashem. No, it's all right. It's okay. I mean, I could look up on my phone, but my phone's busy. Right. Anyway, there's all sorts of verses next week, right?
Set up Malbim over here.
Is it have Bereshis?
There's a Russian Bereshis right there.
Oh, Russian Bereshis.
It says like Top.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought we were looking for Shmos.
We're looking for. I'm sorry, Shmais. We are looking for Shmais. I'm sorry. Is there a Shmais?
Yeah, we have Shmos. Malbim.
Okay, Malbim. That's Navim.
If you need Megillah.
I need a Megillah. It's all right. We're okay. A Grace Megillah. Okay. So if you look in those psukim, right? So there's all sorts of. Right in the beginning of Shmais Gimel, it talks about how difficult it was. Sorry, not Shmais Gimel. Where is it? Right. So first Moshe by the SNES, and Moshe said the SNES, Shmais Gimel. So wait, where's this pasuk? Because the psukim
This one is Va'era.
right in the beginning in Va'era. Right, okay. So at this point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is chastising Moshe Rabbeinu, right, for complaining. And even right there it says, right, there's the civilization of Mitzrayim, the burdens of Mitzrayim. Right? But then it says Moshe spoke to the Jewish people and they didn't listen because of Kaitzer Ruach and of Veata Kasha. I'm sorry, it's not right there. But there are psukim, all sorts of psukim that they're tough in the end of the Shmos, right? They talk about how difficult the Shibud was, right? And it was backbreaking work, etc., etc. So why this is so interesting? This is the pasuk that the Rebbe chooses to be the prototype for what was wrong, what was so difficult, and all the darkness in Gullus, is they didn't listen to Moshe. Va'al derech zeu b'chol Gullus, so too in every Gullus. Sheyeshnam kama nisyonis. There are a number of trials and challenges. B'kiyum Torah mitzvahs, performing Torah mitzvahs. Right, so that's the nature of Gullus in general. But the time of Purim, hine az, then at the time of Purim, B'zman Gezeres Haman, in the time of the Gezer of Haman, Hayehelim ve'Hester ad Yosef. The concealment was even greater. Right? It was a terrible time. This was the only time in Jewish history that there was a Gezerah of Mavis against every single Jew alive in the face of earth. The only time was Purim. Even 80 years ago, it was only on basically half the Jewish people. Now, only, I mean, that's, you can't exactly say only, but relative to Purim, it's only, because it was only half the Jewish people. Right? The Jewish people that did not live in Europe and ultimately North Africa, even though Baruch Hashem, that they weren't affected, but anybody who lived outside of Europe was not affected by that Gezerah. Medina of Achashverosh. Every Jew lived in the borders of that decree. So there was a death sentence passed against every single Jew in the world, which obviously the fact that it was so terrible in Gashmias means that there was also a rather difficult state in Ruchnias, right? And we were at the party. In the Azbisman Gezer Saman Helen Vaster Yesu is unbelievable concealment. Vafal Pikain, and nevertheless, what do we say? Bisman Matan Torah, the time of Matan Torah, Kasher Yisrael B'Tachli Sa'ilui, when Am Yisrael were on the highest level imaginable. We had just counted through 49 days of the Eimer, which elevated us to the 49th level of being Haisa, Korban Abayas. Right? We had just gone through a terrible, terrible situation. The Yidden, the Jews were on the lowest level imaginable. And yet then, Dafka, then they accepted the Torah more powerfully than any other time. That's the Pella, because you would think exactly the opposite. And he explains the Frierdiker Rebbe. It's all still the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Bezmana Gezeira, at the time of the decree, Hayakim Atar and Mitzvah Shalom b'Mesiras Nefesh. The performance of Torah mitzvahs with Mesiras Nefesh. So the Rebbe is going to explain two levels of that. The noisef lezeh, in addition to the fact, shehaya lehem, in other words, there's going to be something in addition to this basic fact. The noisef lezeh, shehaya lehem mesiras nefesh shaloi lichfor chas v'sholem, that they had mesiras nefesh not to deny chas v'sholem their Yiddishkeit, and that's a very important point that the Alter Rebbe talks about. K'mavur b'Torah or, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Torah or, something that's not obvious when you read the story of Purim. That if they were to, literally, memir datam means to switch their das, but meaning were they to deny their Yiddishkeit and accept upon themselves the das of the religion of the time in Achashverosh's Persia, which you're not supposed to say the names of Avodah Zarah, but so you'll just know, what that was. Basically, Zoroastrianism, and I mean, that's where they were holding at that point. Zorro with the sword. He was Mexican? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was so young when Zorro was around that I didn't really pay much attention. But I just remember I understand that. But I just remember the Z or Z. So I don't know what Mexicans call it. It's probably not either.
Not sure.
French call it a Z. X, Y, Z. I don't know what this man is called. But so that was if the Yidden had Chas v'Shalom given up Yiddishkeit and accepted that religion, then they were no longer part of the decree, because the decree was only for Yehudim, people who were Shayach to Das Yehudis. So you could save yourself. Whether that was the case in Europe in the 30s is not so clear. Right? If a Jew could save themselves by doing that. Right? You know, the different anti-Semites have different understandings of Jews. Remember, my father always used to tell us this. This was his way of reminding us that we're Jewish, and regardless of what you think, that they're all going to know you're Jewish, and you can't do anything about it, so you might as well be Jewish. He's having a conversation with someone who he knew, and a non-Jewish guy. They were talking about some guy. His last name was Black. I don't know who the guy was. So the non-Jewish guy said, well, of course Black is Jewish. So my father says, he's not Jewish. There's nothing to do with the Jewish community. He's not Jewish. He says, what do you mean he's not Jewish? I know he's Jewish. I sit beside him in church every Sunday. My father was just silent and said, oh, okay. And he came home and told us that story. He said, remember this story. This is an important story to remember. Of course he's Jewish. So I'm not sure what the Medini, I mean, it's not Baruch Hashem, it's over, and we don't have to know these things. So I'm not sure what the Medini was in Nazi Germany relative to Jews who decided that they weren't. They weren't. Look, certainly non-religious Jews were taken as much as religious Jews. That was certainly no question.
I think even Jews who were baptized.
Yeah, I would assume. Sure.
Even if you had one Jewish relative on either side, even if you weren't biologically Jewish, if you had a paternal grandfather who was Jewish, right, you could have gotten taken.
Right. So interesting enough, in the time of Purim, and this is a Kiddush of the Alter Rebbe, because you don't find it anywhere else, that if they could have saved themselves, Ki Gezerah Isa Rak Al Yehudim. Gezerah was only shy to the Yehudim. But no one had that external thought. Oh, so that's the basic. So what's that? They didn't deny their Yiddishkeit. So it Mesiras Nefesh not to deny their Yiddishkeit. That was the first step. But there's even more. Haya lahem, in addition to this, is the Noisaf. Haya lahem Mesiras Nefesh gam al kiyut Torah and mitzvahs. They also had Mesiras Nefesh for the performance of Torah and mitzvahs. Not just that they were Mesiras Nefesh not to deny their Yiddishkeit. They were Mesiras Nefesh to make their Yiddishkeit even stronger and more vibrant and more public. Until they got together groups of people and learned Torah Mesiras Nefesh, like we talked about yesterday, right? That they made the rallies in the main soccer stadium in the middle of Tehran. And how did this happen? Oh, so now this is very interesting. Look what the Rebbe says. Now that's pretty clear from the story, right? Mordechai, there's no question that Mordechai is the galvanizing force that's bringing all the Yidden together at the time of Purim. Okay, but what about Kosis Lamar? Where's that in all this? I mean, it's there. It certainly is. There's the ultimate Kosis, this terrible Gezerah, Mesha Shebedere, Mesha of his generation. Oh. So the advantage of Purim is that we came to a state of Mesiras Nefesh. That force which brought us to that state, it was Mordechai, Moshe Shebedor. V'zeu, and this is Pshat v'kibul Yehudim es Sheir Chalul Asais. This is the Pshat that the Yidden accepted that which had only begun at Matan Torah. The Matan Torah, I says Rakas Cholam. Matan Torah, the Mesiras Nefesh was not necessary. There was a conceptual Mesiras Nefesh. Nasev and Nishma is considered a conceptual Mesiras Nefesh. I'm giving up my Ratzon. I don't have a Ratzon. I will do whatever is written in this book, and I will then come to understand it. It has nothing to do with what I want, it's what you want. Okay, so there's a level of Mesiras Nefesh in that, because Mesiras Nefesh is understood in terms of Avodah as Mesiras HaRatzon. Okay, he had Mesiras Nefesh to do that mitzvah. What does that mean? Someone's trying to kill him? No, no one's trying to kill him. But he mamish moved his rutzah and his own desires to the side and did the mitzvah. Okay, so that's called Mesiras Nefesh on a conceptual level. So that level of Mesiras Nefesh was definitely there at the time of Matan Torah. Other Rabbah, the ultimate expression of it. Shigdimu nasa l'nishma. First nasa, then nishma. But not Mesiras Nefesh before mamish. No one's trying to kill us. The first time that we faced such a threat was Purim. And then it was an interesting question. So what are the Yidden going to do now? How powerfully connected to Torah are they? Are they willing to give up their lives for this? When push comes to shove, if they're told, okay, we're going to wipe you out unless you deny your connection to Torah, are they going to deny their connection, or are they going to be Meiser Nefesh? And we see at the time of Purim they're Meiser Nefesh, so that we see at the time of Purim that the Yidden made the most powerful statement imaginable of their unbreakable connection to Torah and mitzvahs, and that's the Kabbalah Torah Purim. The Matan Torah Isa Rak Haschola B'Zman Gzeres Haman Isa Kabbalah. Ki al Yedei Shayel Emaz Mesiras Nefesh B'Foyel, by virtue of the fact that there was for them then Mesiras Nefesh B'Foyel al Torah and mitzvahs, for Torah and mitzvahs, not just for not being kafir, but also for the fact positive expression in Torah and mitzvahs. Nisalu, they were elevated be'inyan zeh, in this way, relative to this particular aspect of them, l'madrega nailish yeser, even a higher level, mikmei shayu b'zman Matan Torah, than they were at the time of Matan Torah. There's levels of Matan Torah that are obviously much higher than the levels of Purim, that's clear. But in terms of this, Mesiras Nefesh, much higher in time of Purim than Matan Torah. V'lochein az dafka, therefore, specifically then, haisa Kabbalah, v'kibla Yehudim. Oh, okay. So the bottom line is Ois Dalet. We're not finished Ois Dalet. The Rebbe's going to ask some questions in Ois Dalet. We're going to start answering them in Hay. The bottom line in Ois Dalet is the Rebbe explains the Frierdiker Rebbe's shot in the whole story of Purim, which comes up in the Maimer. Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, right? Because the Frierdiker Rebbe's explanation of Veata tetzave comes after the Rebbe's explanation of Purim. Frierdiker Rebbe. First he explains the story of Purim, and then he starts talking about Veata tetzave. Now in our Maimer it's the other way around. Okay, say this. So the Rebbe's going to deal with that also. We'll see that tomorrow. Look at that. Look at that timing. This is one of the great moments of education here.
To the second.
To the second.